And I believe we are live. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to For the Love of Comics. A very warm welcome wherever you are in the world. It's been a long time since I've been live. Actually, it's been a long time since I've had anything on this channel, but it's fantastic to be here. And I can already see people in the chat. Excellent. Quick hygiene check right at the beginning. Is everyone hearing me okay? Is my picture coming across all right? Am I synchronized? Is everything matching up? And let me see who's in the chat. Greetings, greetings. We've got the Pal 11 Pacific time in the US for those in different locations. Matt Walk, good to see you. Rudak, good to see you. Alejo Toro, excited. Sleepy Reader, salutations, sir. Shuri Pandey, good to see you, Alejo. Michael Hay, audio is perfect. Excellent. Let me know if it's too loud. It's been so long. I wasn't sure if all of my connections were still working. Oh, it's fantastic to see everyone here. This is very exciting because this is not at all a very planned live stream. I don't have much of an agenda except for what you see in the title, but I've been excited to talk about it, and I've been missing, and I've been doing some posts, particularly on the YouTube community page as well as the Instagram page, and of course the new Instagram page for the publishing house, which I'll talk about as well. But there's been a lot going on, and there's been a lot, particularly in the last couple of weeks, that sort of just got jammed and packed into it. And I just wanted to chill, sit back on a Sunday night and just chat with people who I haven't chatted with in a while and talk about what's been going on, as well as answer any questions there may be. So this is a very informal live stream. In fact, I don't even know if I'll leave the recording up. This might be one of those self-destructing live streams. I've had a number of them. It's whoever's here live, we chat, and then the VOD is never available. This might end up being one of those. Let's see how it goes. But good to see everyone here. Colin Taylor, good to see you. Cortados Comic Chaos, greetings from Berlin. Good to see you. Florian Eder, good to see you. Tommy, good to see you. Long time no see. Everyone's all set to go. We've got people from all over. Yes, that's another thing. I do let people know if it's your first time or even if it's not, to leave in the chat where you're joining the live stream from. Just seeing where everyone's joining from, for me as well as for other viewers, I think is quite a thrill. Good to know that the sound and the audio is good. Excellent. So, how's it been? How's it been going? I do have my headphones on because I was so unsure of not having done this for a while. I might take them off in a little bit. And the only reason I'm wearing this hat is because I haven't had a haircut, which is also why I've been wearing a hat in some of the photos that I've shared that some of you may have seen. And yes, it has been a long time since I've seen some of you on the stream, and there are some new names. Great to see the new viewers and subscribers to the channel. A very warm welcome, and the chat over here and people who've been around for a while will make you feel right at home. We've also got Ashwita in the chat, who's never really called to do much moderating, but she's there right now. But once again, she may not stick around for the entire live stream. She's been very busy as well, as you may gather. Rhode Island, Kolkata, Sweden, Austria, Southend-on-Sea, the UK, Portland, Oregon. Excellent. New Mexico. It was my official. It might be my official author hat. I was. It has started getting warmer here now, so the hat as well as the headphones might cause more perspiration than I'm looking to share at this time. Good to see everyone. I really am quite excited, so therefore I might be a little flustered at the start of this live stream. But as I said, I don't really have an agenda. I wanted to catch up anyone who may not have been following along on the YouTube community page or the Instagram page with what's going on. And those of you who've been around for a while may have, about a year ago, may have been on a live stream or watched the recording of it later, in which I had let slip what the whole plan was. But then I've kind of not really talked about it in public, which now is public. So I would say that the channel viewers of this channel had an inkling of what was going on long before we completely did. It was like about a year ago, I was on a live stream, and this was after I had quit my job, and I'd made a video about quitting my job and starting the Patreon and all of those kind of things. And there was a live stream immediately following that. And over there, in just discussions, when people were saying, so what are you going to do now, etc., I said, oh, well, I think Ashwita and I are going to start a publishing house. And we had just talked about it. Like, we'd been obviously talking about it in the air for a very long time. I've been talking about it with anyone who cares to listen for many years now. But we just concretely talked about it maybe 2 days before that and decided, all right, this is what we want to do. And it had just been sort of that. And then I went ahead and announced it on a live stream. It's a good thing that these streams usually have a grand total of, 20 viewers, although there are 20 viewers right now. So thank you very much. So I had let that slip, and there were some conversations and questions about it, and then sort of radio silence. And it wasn't there wasn't really much to talk about because of what I took that period of time to do, both as far as, the logistics of financials and setting yourself up for doing something, as well as studying the thing that I wanted to do. I wanted to study the market, the product, which just meant buying a lot of comics, which is a good reason to say that's the business I want to get into. But our plan was to start a small independent publishing company, specifically about, publishing comics, graphic novels, and illustrated books, because both Ashwita and I have a great fondness for illustrated books, but we find them often consigned to just children's books, and nothing against children's books and nothing against children's illustrated books. And many of my favorite books are illustrated children's books, and I've often talked about the overlap or intersection between illustrated books and comics. But even illustrated books for adults, and those are things that we have a great fascination and love for. So we wanted to try our hand, after all of the time that we have spent individually and together in the publishing industry in India, trying to put some of our theories to the tests, putting some of our ideas of why things work and why things don't work, and what we are most frustrated by as publishing professionals, as well as writers and artists. And a lot of our friends are writers and artists, and a lot of this has come out of talking with them and seeing what their experiences are, and thinking that, hey, maybe we could do things a little differently. Of course, the background for us is not only in editorial and development, and not only that, but I've also worked in a lot of operational, financial, etc. roles, just as my job evolved over the last 2 years. So we thought we had a fairly good grasp on certain concepts and basics, and we also thought that we had some theories to test. So it's it's a combination of that. I think our notion was there are certain things that we need to learn, and then there are certain things we want to put into play because we think others are missing something over here. So there is a little bit of a personal, I don't know what the right word would be, a personal vision, but also a personal criticism of certain things when it comes to processes, when it comes to the way publishing is done, as well as comics in general, like how difficult it is. It was just a thing that fascinated us, and it seemed quite like a natural extension of who we are, what we love, as well as what we have spent our professional lives in and around. So that's what I've been doing for the last year, is trying to figure out what exactly is required, and seeing what people have done and what has been successful and what has not been successful, and trying to get a sort of idea about how much of that are we capable of doing? All of which has culminated in the last couple of weeks with us announcing the launching of our brand new independent publishing house, Indian Summer Press, and launching our first comic, a 24-page black and white single issue, which is chapter 1 of what's proposed to be a six-part story that eventually should be something that we collect into a 144-page graphic novel, but it's going to come out in 6 parts. And that's our first comic. And in this live stream, I'll talk a little bit about any and all of this that anyone is interested in. I have received some questions beforehand. There'll be some questions, I'm sure, that are over here. I'm not really sure how to approach these questions. Do I go chronologically? Do I go with whichever question gets the most interest? I will maybe take a look at what's on the chat right now, because there's a way that I'd like to arrange the questions that I've already received, and let's see if some of these things intersect with what's coming up. So then I'll group them in together. Donovan Sloan from South Africa, good to see you. Bunkmaster B, good to see you. The other side of the table experience, indeed, yes. This is from a very small but very lovely independent comics fest, which was sort of our de facto launch platform. That's where our comic first became available, and now we're also selling it off our website online. But the other side of the table that Bunkmaster B is referring to is us being at that fest at a tiny little table with our comic. Does India have many homegrown comics? Yes, actually, it does. And that's one of the things that I'd like to get into a little bit more, not just on this live stream, but in general. It's something that I've been learning about. In fact, I would say that India probably has way more homegrown comics than what would the opposite of homegrown be, corporate comics. It's pretty much all homegrown. Even if you have a publishing company out there who's been around for many years and has a stable of characters, it's still probably a sort of homegrown business. There are a couple of things that I've heard about now that are ventures and much more funded. I don't have a lot of details on those, but I'd say independent publishing, what we think about it in the indie publishing, is pretty much what comics publishing is, with a few exceptions. Shuri Pandey saying not much, and I think it's both true and not true, as in there are a lot of comics. They may not have a big reach, they may not have big print runs, but I am happy to report that there are lots of comics being made. Now, are they the kind of comics that we have in mind when we think about comics? I think that part of it might be different from person to person, but definitely in the zines, in the self-published, little digitally printed, which is what we're doing, photocopied, stapled together sort of things, an extension of that, there seems to be a lot, and there seem to be a lot of student as well as young professional collectives that are banding together to sort of put out anthologies and collections, as well as their own individual works. Rich will be catching up on the replay. See you later, Richard. The print runs and the printing, a bigger expense for a small publisher? Definitely, definitely. And we'll get into that in any level of detail you want to, Sleepy, because this is the kind of stuff that I particularly find fascinating. I like the nuts and bolts of it, and I like this idea of how do we take what's a concept and an ideal sort of thing and make it practical, and what are we actually trying to do when we say make it practical? What are the problems that people face, and what's viable and what's not viable? That's something that's really interesting to me. And of course, as a publisher, it should be. It's not just the same thing as self-publishing or even making something and distributing it myself. Even that should have an idea of how viable this is, unless it's purely for the love of it and you're giving stuff away. But there's got to be some sort of a switch, I think, if you want to make a go of it. And what a go of it means is also something that we can explore. Greetings from the Philippines. Hello, Arendam. Good to see you here. Have you been writing stories throughout your life? All right, great. So now look, we'll go autobiographically and we'll go chronologically. This is a good idea. One is, where did this idea come from? One is Ashwita and I both are writers. Ashwita's more proven as a writer because she's actually been published, but I've been writing. I've always been interested in writing. I've taken breaks from it every now and then, but there's always some form of the other writing that I enjoy, even if it is, reviews online or something like that. Some of my videos are scripted, and I think about those things as writing as well, because I'm trying to achieve a certain effect, which is similar to when I used to write fiction. But I have written fiction as well as creative nonfiction before. I'm not much of a research writer, so I'm not really like a history or science writer, for example, but creative nonfiction, personal essays, travel writing, those are things that I have dabbled in. But I appreciate, of course, all kinds of writing, and I've been a student of literature, and reading is one of my favorite hobbies, as it is Ashwata's. So we do both have a background, although I honestly think that the only background one needs is a sort of deep love for reading. If you want to publish, you've got to love reading. If you want to publish comics, you've got to love reading comics. I really think that's the only qualification it takes, but I do think that we are also good editors. In fact, and this is the second thing about me in general, and I think even from the days when I was in college and in writing workshops and things like that, I think I got the impression, and I might have been told this as well, is that I'm a good writer, but I'm also a very good editor. I might be a better editor than I'm a writer. Now, I like that. I like that idea. I think I am a good editor in some ways, especially when it comes to writing and language. And I've tried to use that in things like video and learning about video, where a lot of that, not in a live stream like this, but the way you cut, what you leave in, what you leave out, these are the kind of things that shape the narrative or the effect that you have or that you want to have. That focus on the craft, I think, is something I really enjoy. And I think working with editors, other editors, working with other writers, working with people who do the same kind of things, I've found that to be something that I find very rewarding. There is a certain isolation to writing, and I think that also is something that I see when I'm editing and I'm shooting videos all by myself and then sitting hour after hour editing. It's very solitary, and there's something about the collaborative aspect of working with someone on something when you're an editor and they're the writer, or when you're the writer and they're the editor. That collaborative aspect really, I think, for me at least, manages to open things up in a way that sometimes that isolated focus cannot. And that is also something I've seen is a thing that is often missing when people are creating something and self-publishing. When there's all that passion and love behind it, even if you spend a lot of money, the editorial aspect of it isn't usually a consideration, because it's just you, and whatever you do, you put that out there. So there's very often been cases of me encountering something in prose or in comics that has real potential, but needed some work. It needed some shaping, it needed some feedback, it needed some guidance, and somebody to say, no, that's not a good idea, or what about more of that, or this isn't quite consistent, or this is jarring. A number of those kind of things where you see the raw potential available, but there is this idea that whatever it is what that is. And that's not, that's not really our way of looking at things. We like working with feedback. We like working with reviews and working with readers and understanding whether we're succeeding in what we want to do or not. And I think that aspect of it, that editorial aspect of it, is something that we both thought is something we can bring our skills to. So not only with our writing, our own writing, but us working editorially with other writers. And over here, and I've said this before, and I'll probably repeat this again and again, when I think about comics, I think about drawing as a form of writing. So when I say writer, I don't necessarily mean the person who's credited as the writer. And this is something, again, I think I've always felt a certain way, but after having worked on just these 24 pages on just this first chapter of this longer story in collaboration with someone, I have a even more concretized idea of this, is that drawing is a form of writing, and then storytelling in comics is writing and drawing put together to tell a story. So when I say writer, in many cases, I mean, you can take to mean author, which a writer and an artist are both authors. So I think authors need a certain type of feedback, need a certain type of guidance, particularly when they're just starting out, when they haven't developed a voice yet, or when they haven't got that experience under their belt. And that's something I think is a key role of a publisher, is that editorial aspect of it. And us being able to be confident in our abilities to do that with our work and with other people's work, I think was a big impetus in what we thought we could bring as a company, what we thought was almost missing when we look at the way a lot of publishing is done, whether it's at the corporate and really big numbers level, or at the independent self-published level. Both of them, for very different reasons, seem to be lacking this sort of editorial view when it comes to the craft, when it comes to the shaping of the work, and seem to rather focus maybe on sales and marketing. But without that editorial, the sales and marketing doesn't make any sense. That is, again, that's the second part of our theory. But that was really one of the most, that was the primary driver for us. Welcome from Pune. Excited to join your first live stream. And these exciting, thank you so much. So another question that came up is, are we planning to publish other people's work other than the work? So I'll talk a little bit about my comic and the work that we have published, but some of these general questions, and the answer is absolutely yes. The idea of starting a publishing house is not to create a brand for our self-publishing or for only our work. It is really, as I was saying, to have this editorial and development-oriented approach, but then bring to that sort of looking at marketing, looking at sales and distribution, and looking at how things are set up and what the mechanics of these things are and how they work, and whether it's worth trying to play a certain type of game at all. And once again, I can get into the details of this as much as people want, but there is common wisdom when it comes to publishing and when it comes to markets and when it comes to products. And that common wisdom is sort of parroted and repeated no matter who you are, no matter what you're doing. And that is something that just strikes us as being very odd. It has to be a wisdom according to what you're doing, for whom you're doing it. It has to be particularized. And that lack of specificity, that lack of understanding, what is this book? What is this author wanting to do? Who is this author speaking to? What is their, what is the unique thing in them? Understanding that is key to being able to market it or to get it into the right hands. And too often it's a much more mechanized and ritualistic process in which that sort of care is not at all given. And that's something that we think as editors and writers who care about what we're doing, we automatically become the best marketers. We find in some ways the reader is the best marketer. The recommendation, speaking as a person who does recommendations on YouTube, the recommendation is the most potent form of marketing. It seems the most genuine. It comes from someone having enjoyed something. So to a large extent, our notion is if you create something truly good, if you create something really wonderful that people enjoy reading, they'll do your marketing for you. It's that word of mouth that is the more grassroots thing that we should be focusing on rather than discount structures to distributors and things like that. So, of course, everyone thinks that what they have is great, and it's only a question of everything else not being there that's preventing this great thing from being known. And I think that's where that little balancing act comes in, where maybe this is not as great as you think it is, and maybe there needs to be some work done to it to make it great. And then when we know it's great, then when we think it's great and are convinced that it is great ourselves, we are the perfect marketers for it, because we know who we want to put it in front of, and we know what it is about it that they will enjoy. So it's sort of inextricable from each other, that editorial and sales and marketing, and that's sort of the cornerstone of what we want to do as a publishing house. Now, it's an extremely tiny publishing house, so there's a lot of big theory without the muscle to pull it off in any significant manner. But that is the path that we want to head down. So the answer to the question is, we will be accepting pitches and we will be accepting submissions from other creators. Of course, that's what we want to. That's what we're in it for. However, we will not be looking to take it and publish it. So it's not a vanity press where, okay, you pay the money. It's like the publisher invests the money, and then the money is a risk. So the publisher always has to think about, how am I going to make my money back, and how many copies am I actually going to sell, to whom, for what reason will they be buying this, what will they think of it. All of these things become considerations. So we definitely want to be involved in the development and the entire putting together of something, of people's works. And for that, we'll also be accepting pitches and submissions from our website, as well as for commissioning people that we may want to reach out to. At this point of time, it's not just about solicited manuscripts, to use our publishing terms. We are open to unsolicited pitches, as long as they follow a particular, very rudimentary system that we want to do. So if you are interested, or if you know people who are interested, it's there on our website, indiansummerpress.com. Under the submission section, there's a little bit of a write-up. I mean, when I say a little bit of a write-up, it's we've received feedback that maybe you don't want things to be so wordy, and our response has been, we're wordy people. This is the way we're going to write our website. This is the way we're going to write our Instagram posts. It's no point pretending that we are something else and trying to look catchier and slicker and more contemporary. In some ways, we are old-fashioned and we are verbose. And that's kind of the way we like to explain things, this live streaming being a very good example of it. So you might find it a more verbose sort of website, but it is somewhere that we hope to explain sort of a little bit about what our philosophy is, what our approach is. And over the days, we'll hopefully create an FAQ where people will have questions. They may have questions about how we plan to do certain things, or, what the contracts with authors are going to look like, and things like that. And there'll be certain stages in which we'll talk about it, but we will definitely want to commission, and we will want to receive pitches, and we'll want to develop the pitches into the product, the book that we want to publish. And those are the things that we're looking for as far as collaboration is concerned, is those ideas that will be accompanied by the enthusiasm to develop it, to sort of take it and break it down and put it back together and break it down, which is what we believe doesn't happen enough right now. It's sort of a first draft, a close to first draft thing that we want to get rid of. At the same time, we do want to keep some processes in place, so you're not redoing things that are extremely labor intensive. And understanding comics, that means not getting to inks and having to redo things, is to understand that the script of a comic isn't just words on a page, but the thumbnails and the roughs. There are certain ideas we have about what we want at every stage, in order to make sure that we're taking the developmental approach, but not increasing the tremendous amount of work that it takes to make these things. So understanding that process and creating the right workflow, work stream thing is also a very big part of that publishing approach. So we're definitely going to be going in that direction. A corollary to that was, are you going to publish work from people outside of India? And I think this one's a little bit more complicated because the first answer is, of course, we would love to, but it is a very small Indian publishing company. We don't have distribution even in the most traditional sense, although we have a couple of things that are sort of interesting and I can talk about them. But international sales is something that we don't know about. We know that there are people who are interested, and I know that there are people in the chat right now who'd love to, buy a copy, and I'm really grateful for that. And I'm very, I'm very excited about everyone getting to read this. I'm not sure how the hard copy thing is going to work, which is why we will explore the ebook option. Because, as I was saying in one of the chats, some comic is better than no comic, and we are all big fans of the physical product. But just because I don't read books digitally doesn't mean that I don't know the value when it comes to things like this, when it comes to things like access. So I think if we are not able to figure out how to get, because it's only a 24-page black and white comic, so the shipping is just more, is twice the price of the comic itself. And then you've got chances of damage, and have you packed it enough, and is it too fragile? Then what if there is customs, and then that wasn't part of the charge? And I really don't even know how to accept payments from foreign accounts or foreign exchange. I'm sure the government would have something to say about that, and they might have some questions, or there might be some paperwork that I need to go through. So those are things that we haven't yet explored. One of the things that I love the idea of is maybe getting a bunch of comics to a sort of hub and then having it sort of distributed out of there. So if I know someone who's going to the UK or going to the US, is there a way I can get a bunch of comics over? And then, but then, someone's got to figure out distribution and the logistics of it. So it's something a little further away, or it's not something that we have a solution for right now. I mean, if people can think of things, that would be great, and I'm willing to discuss anything that might come up. It's just that we've looked at a lot of things and we've thought about a lot of things, and they're all coming up short in some way outside of someone's traveling somewhere and you just take a bunch of comics with you and then mail them out and then figure out a way to get paid over there. So right now, our approach is very much a direct to customer sales. So we sold at the Indie Comics Fest at a small table, and then we've been selling copies of our website with people placing orders, making payments, and us shipping it out to them, packaging and shipping it out to them. So that's been the approach so far, but it's like this tiny little thing, and it's just like the few copies that we printed. So how we do this, even at a larger level, is something that we need to think of. First of all, we have to see if things get to a larger level, and if this is all there is to it, then fine, we can handle this. It's not that big a deal. But we would love to have the works of creators from all over, but we do want to have Indian comics being made by Indian creators, published for Indian readers, because that's sort of the first primary impetus, is that there is a lack of appreciation of comics. And I know all of us say this about everywhere, but I think particularly in India, like we look at North America or Europe, Japan, of course, we look at other countries and we say, there's it might be a subculture in some places. In some places, it's just, it's absolutely a primary culture, but it's there, and it's there in a very distinct way in which you can talk about the industry, and you can talk about, things in it like pay and like all of the things that we hear about, the controversies, the good things and the bad. Those conversations take place because at least there is a scale, and then there is a readership at a certain level. And our question is that, is there such a readership in India? Is there a potential for such a readership in India? And of course, our answer has been yes, we believe there is. So we do want to sort of grow the appreciation of comics in India. So we'll be publishing for the Indian audience, but you can grow the appreciation of comics through any comics. And it doesn't have to be something that you have created or only someone from India has created. And this brings me to another question, which was asked just as soon as we showed the logo and announced the company, is that, are you planning to reprint European masters? And, it's a fantastic idea, and it's quite intoxicating, but it might be a little out of our league. However, having said that, this idea of licensing and reprinting at an affordable price for a market, certain things that are not otherwise available, I think is a thing that publishers do quite. It's quite a valuable thing that many publishers do, and it would be wonderful to be able to do something like that. And I know that there are many such publishers who do it at small scale, at whatever scale possible. If we were capable of doing that, it would be fantastic to bring other comics from other places in the world in India to India. But of course, we'd have to get a better sense of the market. We'd have to know about how many copies do you think you're going to sell, and where are you going to sell these, and where do people buy? And I think that's going to be the kind of homework that we would need to do for anyone to even take us seriously. Like even if someone's interested in doing that, why would they do it with two people who just say they've started a publishing house by putting up an Instagram post? You've got to bring something to the table. And I don't believe that we have that. Of course, we don't have that now, but it would be something to work towards. And it's similar to, I think, working with creators. I'd like to work with anyone who wants to make good comics in a particular way that makes us all happy. But what that is can be different on a case-by-case basis. And I do think that it's important to set your sights at one manageable, chewable bite at a time, and sort of approach it that way. So one thing is not to get too carried away by doing this and this and this. Right now, there is this story that we're working on, and we want to see what pitches we get. We want to see what ideas people bring to us and what we can get from that. And in fact, that is what we would have started with. But again, the same question came up, is if someone does have an idea someone does have a comic, why would they come to you? Why would they ask you to be the publisher of it, instead of either going to one of the corporate publishers who will have way more money and much more distribution as far as their deals are concerned with existing channels, or self-publish it, in which they have complete control over every single aspect of it and can keep all the money that they make from it. Like, why would you come to someone who is neither this solution nor that solution? And there are a number of other things available as well. I've seen a lot of companies that offer a turnkey production solution. So they will do the typesetting and the image setting, the composition. They will do the page layouts as far as the print stuff is concerned, and get it printed for you on things. You just have to pay all the bills plus a cut. So they're sort of working as a service company. And that's obviously not what we want to do. And then there are other places that are, well, we have a stable of IP, as they like to call it, and this is the company's IP, and we will pay you page rates and work for hire, and maybe a royalty, maybe so, but the IP and the copyright is that of the companies, and that's not what we want to do either. So having something be creator owned means, how does the publishing house make money, and why should they make any of the money that they say that they want to make? So over there, what we really need, I believe, are proof of concepts to say, this is what we're talking about and this is how we plan to do it. And that's really where this comic that I've written sort of came from, because it's been something we've been talking about. Nikhil, the co-author and artist of this, Nikhil and I have been talking about this since last year, since I quit my job, and we vaguely started talking about the publishing house. But it's only when we realize that no one else is going to just come to us and say, hey, publish my comic, when we said, no, we need to get cracking with this and we need to start putting this out there and we need to start telling this story in this way. And then people will say, hey, I like that story. Maybe they'd like my story. And that's the kind of thing that I think is sort of that's part of what we're talking about, is like we want to publish things we want to read. So if we say this is the kind of stuff we want to publish, and I'm not saying we only want to publish stuff like this, whatever this is, but the idea is you do need to bring something to the table. You do need to be able to say, this is who I am, and this is what I stand for, and this is what we want to do, and this is what we mean. And that's the approach that we want to take. We want to selectively pick and choose the best things to put out there, because they become, hopefully, the calling card. They become what you stand for. And that is what people are attracted to, whether they're readers or whether they're creators. So that's the theory that we're starting it off on, at least. All right, I'm going to take a little bit of a break here, drink some water, and go through some questions over here on the chat. Do you have a theme, scope, or style in mind for what your publishing house will be putting out? No, not a theme or a style. Scope being, I would say that we're interested in stories. So anything that's a good story is something we would like to publish. We are thinking more as far as long form comics are concerned. So a lot of independent comics we see are extremely short form. They're 1 page or 2 page. A lot of them are based in comedy, a lot of political comedy. We also see very short autobiographical, anecdotal snapshot sort of pieces. And there's a lot to love in them. And there are obviously many comics that I've enjoyed that fall into that category. But rather than collecting those into a volume, which we think is something that independent publishing and self-publishing, I think, is very good at that. It's very expressive and it's very idiosyncratic, but it's also quite intimate and handmade. I think we want to be a little bit more in the longer form. It can be fiction, it can be non-fiction, it can be any genre, science fiction, fantasy, horror, sports, romance, everything is fair game. I think, as I say, a good story is a good story, and we don't think it should be of a particular... There are no genres off the table in that way. What else? I think it's just like good stories. I don't know if that's a theme. I do know that I admire Drawn and Quarterly as a publisher. I think they're very admirable from the kind of range of what they put out and how, how they nurture voices. So reading the Drawn and Quarterly 25 years book has been fairly inspirational for me at this time as well. It's a good idea to print others' work. Absolutely. That's what a publishing house is for. So we're definitely going to be looking for artists and writers that we can work with. Editorial quality, aiming first towards word of mouth excitement. Yes, exactly. I mean, that's how we'd want to start it. And in some way, that's kind of where we'd always want to have our core, is people really enjoy reading that book or people really enjoy reading that work. That has to be primary. And then you make a reputation as someone who publishes that work or someone who writes that work. I mean, it all comes from the work itself, and developing that work and creating such work, putting in the craft and the time and the effort and the thought that making such things entails is, I think, what we want to help collaborate on. International print on demand. Now, that is something that has been quite interesting to look into. Companies like Ingram, for example, where you can have a central file and you can print it anywhere in the world for sale in that world. And that has been one of the options that's probably the most close to what the world needs as a solution to these things. I think that's just the way publishing houses should also be thinking, is do I have a print center everywhere and then I can just give a print and get one copy out? And I think for something like a 24-page black and white comic paperback, it might work. I don't think it would work for your nice cloth bound spined, cloth spined hardcovers, section sewn. You might not, or it might become very expensive. And that's what it's about. It's about how expensive is it? How much money does it take when you take that unit manufacturing cost out of it? How do you, how the numbers of it, I think, will remain to be seen. But as a concept, I will say that the international print on demand concept is probably the best. I like print on demand as a rule. In general, I think it's a very good thing that something does never needs to be out of print, that it's always available. Even if one person wants one copy, they can get it. I love that idea, but it does have some very concrete sort of stumbling blocks in it as well. Congratulations on the launch. Thank you, Greg. Woody Balloons asks, are you familiar with Comics Canal? They're a new distributor for independent comics. And what is your opinion on such a venture? I do know Comics Canal. They're an online sales platform. And I think that's a very good idea. And I think there are a couple of such. In fact, we have... people have reached out from a couple of these places saying, hey, can we stock your comics? So we'll have conversations with them. I know there is a discount structure involved, and I think that's where the conversation would probably be, because the idea is a very good idea. And I think especially all independent comics coming together and being available in one platform makes that platform a great destination for people. And especially, like, say in India, we have the Indie Comics Fest Delhi. There might have been many people across India who couldn't get to Delhi, and I might not be able to get to another Indie Comics Fest that's happening in Mumbai or Pune. Now, if there was a way for me to buy the comics that were on sale at that Indie Comics Fest, it would be fantastic. And I think that's the kind of solution websites like these will create. So they don't have to be only the distribution or the thing of one company, which is, of course, you can go to any website, including ours, to buy one product from that website. But I do like the idea. It's a question of the profits. It's a question of the percentages and the shipping, etc., and calculating and looking at those things. But yeah, as I have more conversations, I'll have a clearer idea about it. But as I was saying at the earlier part of the live stream, one thing is that I spent the last 19 years or so working on a lot of print P&Ls and looking at a lot of financial inventory, margins, data, etc. I'm not saying I'm some sort of an expert on it, but there are things as far as the way that we are approaching it. We want Indian Summer Press, our publishing house, to be a creator-owned house, but also to be a profit-sharing model. And that profit-sharing model means that we will not be able to pay page rates. It's not really like a work-for-hire thing. The work that the authors are putting in and the work that the editors are putting in is work that they should be remunerated for, but it comes out of sales, like a higher royalty, or it comes out of profits. And what your costs are things you decide together, including marketing costs. All of that means that making sure we have a healthy margin is important to us, because that's the author and the artist, that's the creator's salary. That's where they're getting paid from. So it's almost a responsibility to deliver the best margin if you want to have that profit sharing model be anything that can compete or maybe surpass a page rate model. And that's where that creator ownership and that split, all of those numbers come into play. And a lot of the traditional distributor model ideas that this is how much you're going to have to give on discount for me to feed it down the chain, it just doesn't apply to small publishers. I mean, it just can't work for small publishers. It can't work for small print runs. You don't have that kind of ability to saturate the marketplace, and you don't have that flexibility to give that kind of a discount. So trying to play that game is sort of a losing situation anyway. So if there are alternatives to those models, they would be fantastic to explore, but they have to be true alternatives. They can't be just another person doing the same thing in a different way. slightly cosmetically. It has to be a fundamental change in the way we do business. At least that's the way we're approaching it as far as the business side of our publishing house is concerned. Yes, old fashioned and verbose indeed. Colin says, you've mentioned getting some works is challenging in India. You're considering becoming a local publisher. That would be, as I was saying, that would be great if we could license works for reprinting in India. It's kind of a complicated area, though. And the first thing you need to be is you need to be a big name, or you need to have some sort of a reputation, which we do not. So, yes, it's something I would love to do and explore, but I'm also quite. I'm quite realistic in the way that that's not going to be something that just drops into our lap. And even if something did start, there would be expectations from that. They'd expect you to sell a certain number of copies. They'd expect a certain kind of sales revenue to have as part of their share, whoever's giving you that license. And if you can't deliver that, then why should they give it to you? They should give it to someone else who can deliver that. So if I'm not working with the distribution model and I'm not working in that thing, what would be the point? For them is the way I know that I should look at it. Finding comics beyond the big two in India is a lost cause. Yeah, I think PRH, Penguin Random House, and HarperCollins and Hachette are important. If you're talking about imported comics, they're importing more comics, but it's a little spotty, I think, the curation, which comics are coming in, and the big two they do seem to get, that's where the omnibus buying market is, for example. So they've got some more surefire sales, and a lot of these sales are pre-booked before they even come into India. So there'll be a number of books that never make their way to India. At the same time, if there were bookstores who had these curated lists of books they were looking for, the publisher would import them in, at least to supply those bookstores, and and bringing them in, they would then become available in other bookstores. So I don't know exactly how to kickstart that other than go to every publisher and say, let me make you a short list of comics you should be ordering. But I had some very interesting conversations with distributors and retailers lately. And it's just incredible how much discount is asked for at a certain level. So companies like Fantagraphics, etc., they just can't bring their books to India. I mean, they can't put their books on 70% discount. So any Fantagraphics books we buy here have to be imported in, like when we use Bookswagon, they have to be imported in because of our order. And only then does it come over here. So warehousing, man, warehousing is the big problem. Achal Mehrotra says, definitely check out comics by Andy Watson. Are you making fun of me, Achal? I am a big fan of Andy Watson. I've talked about Andy Watson so often on this channel. I'm just joking. Yes, I love Andy Watson. Glister is something I showed in a live stream. A couple of it's a new discovery for Ashwita and me as well. But Little Star, Paris, Sunburn, fantastic books. And of course, the book tour, which made my list of most memorable comics reads of 2022. So I absolutely second your recommendation of Andy Watson. The European reprint. Yes, Shori, I mentioned it, right? Didn't I? Let me know if I didn't answer your question. But yes, I think that those are all the questions about reprints, etc. All right. Bye, Colin. Talk to you later. Paulo Costa, good to see you. How are we handling translation into other languages directly? Very good question. Now, this is kind of related to that other thing is, are we going to publish in many languages? Our expertise and that editorial development and definitely writing, etc., our expertise is with the English language. While we would love to have the comics that we publish translated into other languages, that will be a licensing or a sort of collaboration with another publisher. We want that expertise in translation to really come from someone who has the strength in it the way we feel we have the strength with the English language, but also the other languages. The market is a different thing. The distribution is a different thing. Whatever we are trying with our English language products, it's definitely not going to fly in other languages. This is a much more the English language thing with the pricing and the production, etc. It's a much more elite, and it's a much more like even the price that we have right now. It's not something that an equivalent comic in Hindi will not sell for that price. An equivalent comic in Bengali will not sell for that price. So you need publishers who really understand their market. They understand what paper, color, binding combinations need to be assembled in order to get to a price point that will be acceptable and therefore can work for their distribution. And those are things that we are not even sure we know what we're talking about when it comes to the English work that we're doing. We just have a theory that there might be a parallel way of doing it, a more grassroots way of doing it in circumventing certain things. But when it comes to other Indian languages and those markets, we definitely do not have the expertise. So we would love to see whichever comics we publish. And again, this is all, it's all theory, but that's why I'm here with you guys talking about this theory. It's all theory, but we only have one comic right now, and that's the comic that we're focusing on finishing. I mean, as authors, sure, as publishers, but we're also looking for other comics. We're looking for other things, and we'll always be thinking about them in other languages. But we won't have the expertise of doing that, but we would want them to be there. So we would want to seek out co-publishing deals, and we'd like to seek out other publishers who'd be interested in publishing these comics in other languages. Absolutely. We got Glister from a bookstore. It's one of those bookstore haul videos we made when we were on holiday. But yeah, the Andy Watson other videos are older, so end of 2022, etc. Shrelp, good to see you. If you're on the lookout for creators to publish submissions, maybe, or do you have a personal lineup in mind? Submissions and personal lineup in mind. Everybody I have as a personal lineup is not going to, is going to be way too busy and way too expensive. But I do obviously have dream creators that I would love to see work from and publish. But we are open to submissions. And as I was saying earlier, on our website, indiansummerpress.com, there is a submissions tab and page. It's got a couple of guidelines. We'll be adding more to that. It's sort of an introductory thing, and we'll be inviting people to pitch to us. And so very broadly, and I think this is a good time to do it now. I mean, I've gone through most of those questions. There might be one question from Arindam, which is, are you regretting this, or how do you feel taking the jump? And that might be a good sort of concluding question for this stream. But looking at the things that we're wanting to do, etc., we'd love to take things through a 3-part or 3-stage thing. One would be the pitch. Then a pitch would be something that you turn into a proposal, and a proposal, once accepted, a successful proposal is what leads to a signing. The signing is when you say work begins, and then you have a contract, and then you create a publishing plan. So pitch, proposal, plan are the stages. Pitch is that most raw, basic idea, quickly summarized with a couple of things about how long it's going to be and who the intended readership or audience is. And then you develop that into a proposal, which is a much more detailed summary, but still a summary. And that decision to whether to accept a proposal or not, or whether it needs to be massaged further, that is where the signing and the contract says this is a deal for the thing. So it's not that formal. It doesn't always have to go through these 3 things quite literally, but that is the way that we would want to approach things, because we want that editorial development, because we want that involvement. Now, we also understand that people might bring us things that are quite mature, and therefore our goal would not be at that point to say, oh, you need to redo this or do it again. Then we kind of had to just say, do we want to publish this as it is or not? Which is a harder thing to do. So as far as possible, it would be good if there was development involvement, but there's always the possibility that someone just brings you something and it's fantastic, and you're like, yeah, we'll just do this. Thank you very much. That's always possible. How to write comics books video tutorial. That I think I might be getting a little ahead of myself if I go to. I mean, till today, I've every now and then I've thought, oh, maybe people would be interested in a video lighting tutorial or a video editing tutorial, how I edit my videos. And I'm like, this is you're getting too full of yourself. So, and I'm, as I was saying, I'm kind of happy with the progress I've made over the years with these technical things, and I really wanted to share them. And then I'm like, well, the internet is full of these things. I've only learned from there. So what am I going to say that hasn't been said many times before? And it is a really presumptuous thing to have written one thing. But having said all of this, I am quite happy to share what little, tiny little experience I've had and how that's gone and what that's taught me, because it has really been a fantastic learning process. And as someone who likes comics, I'm sorry to shock anyone in the audience with that, but as someone who likes comics, I was stunned at how much more I discovered about comics while making this chapter. And that part of it, I think I had a little bit of a, I don't know, like a spiritual moment almost, like, oh my God, this is the way your eye moves and this is the way this thing works in this way. Even though I thought I had a pretty good grasp on it, but also I think being a lifelong comics reader and a comics fan and someone who talks about comics and thinks about comics so much, I also think that writing comics was something that when I started doing it, it seemed to come really naturally to me. It came to me more naturally than writing prose when I started writing prose. I mean, not when I was a kid. When I was a kid, writing prose was very easy. But later, when I was, trying to write something meaningful and blah, 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 it was tough. It was tough getting started. And then you'd kind of go on a roll and then you'd kind of dry up and then you'd come back and look at what you had done and not be happy about it. And it was a lot of hard work and then occasional pools of glimmering hope. And this was quite the reverse of it. Maybe I was just excited to be writing a comic, maybe I was just like full of endorphins or something like that. But all the way through, it felt like a much more, like it was coming more naturally to me. And I was sort of thinking about it as a comic and I was seeing it as a comic when I was writing it. But the most important thing, and I think this is I don't think it should surprise anyone, but the most important thing was like whatever I was writing when I was writing the so-called script wasn't really the writing of the comic at all. That was like a preliminary thing. The writing of the comic was the thumbnails. It was the putting together of the page visually and then looking at the script in that context. So the script kind of would tell you how many panels you have per page. And I have an idea. So the way we wrote it, the way Nikhil and I wrote it, is we spent hours, months talking about the story and talking about the characters and talking about and arguing about why something would and wouldn't and putting possibilities over there and just sort of, it was like a roller coaster, but we were just creating things and we were just talking about it. And it was after a certain point of time that we said, all right, we've got to get cracking on this because otherwise we'll just keep talking about it forever. Let's just write one chapter. And then I think the most important thing was saying, let's have the chapter ready for the Indie Comics Fest on March 2nd. And I think that thing was what kicked our butt into gear, where all your theory and all your conversation and all your now just had to be crystallized, and you had a deadline and you had to have that deadline met at all costs. So immediately it became, how long is it going to be, the chapter? Is it going to be 36 pages, 32 pages, 26 pages? Like that itself was something we hadn't decided on for months. We were just talking about the full story and the various sections of it. But 24 pages, all right, we've got 24 pages. Where do we want the story to get to by the 24th page? We say, okay, this is where it needs to get to. let's break down those 24 pages. So when we were writing the script, it was after all of these conversations. When I started writing the script, my basic thing was, what's the scene? So we know the story, or we know the plot. What are the scenes that need to be on the page for us to get that story? And how many panels for how many pages for how many scenes was what we did as a script. But then when it was put into thumbs, that's when it was really the script. That's when the real writing, I would say, began, where you know the dialogue, but the dialogue can change because of the way it looks on the page. You know the panels, but the panels can change because of the way it looks on the page. And we've taken great consideration to think about the recto verso, which is the right-hand side page or the left-hand side page, and which is the single page and which is the double page spread, because we're thinking about it as a physical book. So where the panels were already quite engineered, and they were written in a particular way to have a certain cadence. And I thought, this is why, only people who love comics should write comics, because, this is all very natural. But then when you look at the thumbs, you kind of redo it again. I mean, you don't always break it down completely, but you move things around and you shift things around. So one of the most important things, I think, is that the kind of collaboration that we had is not necessarily what people have. Like we were talking about these things all the time. We were talking about every page, every panel, back and forth all the time. And sometimes I think it works in a very linear way. And this is something that's there not only in comics, but in illustrated books and things like that as well. Bringing us back to that topic, is that someone writes a script and then that script goes away and someone draws it. And so if you've written a script that's very tight and very specific, then it might be drawn that way. And if you've written a very loose script, then that might be left up to the artist to do it. But very often we can do it backwards as well. And we all know about the Marvel method. And I've often thought about David Rubin and Santiago Garcia's Beowulf, which was a thing that came from the artist. It was David Rubin's idea to do a Beowulf, and then he asked Santiago Garcia to be involved and write it with him. But he had particular things he wanted to draw. And it was very similar over here, is that the artist, it's like he had ideas, and there was not just ideas to do with character and plot, but there were also ideas about visuals. And then it was writing those into the story and where they would be and why they would be. And sometimes you couldn't have them because of where the story went. And sometimes the things that you were most happy with as dialogue had to be cut because it didn't fit the story. So the fact that the comic storytelling or the comic script is actually the thumbs was maybe something that I'd always thought of before as, yeah, that's true. But now I know for a concrete fact that if I looked at a piece of paper that was just words, even if they were descriptive words, I wouldn't necessarily think of that as a script. It would be when they've been made into page breakdowns. That's what I consider the comic script. And I think working on those breakdowns over and over again made it so that when we got to the inking stage, it was almost exactly like the roughs. It was very little deviation. It was just a question of finishing the faces and adding the details and things like that. So I don't know if that's how to write comic books, but that was definitely a big thing. In fact, I don't know. Maybe I can share something, because all of you are here and this is so cool. I can give you a sneak peek. I wonder. All right, give me just 2 seconds. I'm going to pull something up on my. Oh, I have some good questions over here as well. Do you have a business plan that has sales metrics necessary for continued operation? Not particularly, because the sales metrics necessary are. So when people think about the sales necessary for operation, they're talking about having certain kinds of costs that we have consciously chosen not to have. So you're absolutely right that it is really time and effort, but we have not hired employees. We don't have an office space. It's all sort of our brain work and using the laptops that we already own. So it's at one level, the investment so far is a question of manufacturing costs. Everything else is salary that we are not paying to ourselves, including to our artists, but they are profit sharers. We're all sharing equally the profits. So the costs being kept low means that when revenue comes in, hopefully the profit's not too far away. So is it a day job for any of us? No, it's not. And I don't think that it's going to be for a long time. But that's not really what we're talking about when we talk about, you know, the kind of investment that's needed. We're talking about the sort of creating one good book and then another good book and another good book. And those, the creation of those books individually are not going to match up to the scale of a publishing house that puts out 100 titles a year. And so those quantities and those numbers are very different. So the sales metrics that we do have are profitability metrics. It's like if I spend $10, I'd like to make $20. So therefore, there is a healthy margin. Now I'm talking about only manufacturing costs, because then you have freight, you have shipping, you have the cost of a table, you have a cost of transport, and there are obviously other kinds of operating expenditure. But having low or zero capital expenditure, or choosing very carefully what your capital expenditure is, means that your revenue gets you to profit faster. Now, how do you get that revenue? What is your market size? Don't over manufacture, don't store. All of this to say is the metrics are more focused on the continuation of the project rather than the paying of salaries or the paying of rent and the paying of bills. And so therefore, the continued operations of the publishing house are not at risk because it's just two people who are going to do it. I mean, if it was bigger, I think it would be different. Ananda, good to see you. Thank you. Glad you like the lighting. So I was going to first of all show you, this is the comic. I don't have my, where is my other screen? There we go. Yes. This is the first chapter of our book, The Sun is Made of Silver, and that's Indian Summer Press, the logo. I'd strongly recommend, I mean, I know not everyone is on Instagram and you don't want to go to Instagram, and I get it. You know, I don't go on Facebook anymore, but there are pictures on there, on the Indian Summer Press Instagram, and you should check out indiansummerpress.com, the website. So get a closer look at the logo, which is a summer sun beating down, and that's a mango tree, and that's a house, which is, you know, where you take shelter from the summer holidays, the heat, the hottest part of the day you spend reading indoors and only step out after the sun has gone down. And this is the rather old-fashioned stamp-oriented logo, which is wonderfully designed by a wonderful designer who I'll talk about in a couple of days as well. And this is a small 24-page black and white comic. There's a front, back cover, inside back cover. We have a little letter to the readers. Oh, but no spoilers. But the reason why I was showing that is, yes, thank you, warm and comforting, a little bit of nostalgia. Yes, as I said, old-fashioned and verbose is definitely the way we're going. But let me see if I can share. I'll take a look at one page. So I'll look at page 1, and I'll say that page 1, the script is written. And after the script is written, it says, this is what's on panel 1, this on panel 2, this is on panel 3, this is what people say. And then Nikhil puts together the roughs. Now, let me see. If I do this, all right, I've gotten the first part of it to work. All right, let's see if I can. Can you see this? All right, I think you can. let me know if you have any problems. I'm coming back to this thing. So this is a rough of our first page. And it's not a color comic. This is just, I think Nikhil got bored at one point of time. And so you've got these two kids, silhouetted figures climbing a hill. And you've got this little boy and this little girl. And he says, Sonotra, you're going too far. Then you've got this panel in which he says, we'll be late and be beaten again. And she says, nonsense. We'll be back before dark, I promise. And you have to see this view coming so close and not taking the last few steps. And then you've got this last panel with just the ellipses in her speech bubble. Now, this was the dialogue and descriptions written about these two kids climbing this hill and this conversation that they're having. This, when we were looking at it, I mean, we were happy with it. It's the way that we wanted it. But there was the first level of annotation is that we change the sizes of the panels and we place where we want the speech balloons to be so that we know which ones are linked and which ones are separate from each other. But we also know how much space they're taking up in the panel. Like with the final lettering, when we put that in there, it becomes a little different from the hand lettering. And at this point of time, I'm also looking at this and I'm looking at the script and we'll be back before dark. It starts seeming a little expository. Yeah, so there's some script writing that's going to change. Even the dialogue is going to change over here. But we're also figuring out how we want this action to go and how the reader's eye is going to be reading this. So we've got the introduction with these two speech balloons. And then as we're looking at this, we're like, this moment does not need to be bigger. And so this panel can be shorter. And this moment's going to be a little longer because she's talking and explaining more. And this is where we want to get to this kind of cresting of the hill. And then we want to get to a smaller panel. So if we, like one way of looking at it is these were more equal in size, the panels, and a lot of the roughs were just about placing the number of panels we want over there, and then we start putting in the spacing of it and thinking about how they read. And when we're looking at this at this point of time, one of the things we had was, here is the little boy saying, oh, I don't want to be beaten again, and her saying nonsense, and then her saying, we'll be back before dark, I promise. But we figured that he is the person who we should be seeing when he's saying this, and he's turning around should be something facing the camera. Like we should be closer to him and know that he's turning around instead of being closer to her. And then when she's talking, we should be closer to her. So we actually said, let's flip these two as far as the camera angle is concerned and turn his shoulder a little bit. So we put we made the sizes of the panels different. We structured the flow of it a little differently. We made sure that our eye was following it. Then I tweaked the dialogue a little bit. And then we had a major switch in camera angles and head position. And then we get to the final inks where we see not only do we have him in the foreground and turned around, and then her in the foreground and talking back over her shoulder, but then also this final thing of, instead of it being a small panel, which we wanted, we thought that Nikhil ended up expanding it over the page. And the last thing we made actually before this final tweak is we moved this hill up a little so that the hill on the left side was lower after she was standing at the top. The final panel, she needed to be slightly higher up in the thing. So those are all the adjustments that went even after the script stage. Even after we had written the script, there was still, in order to get to this final comics page we were very happy with, there were these, and this is just the more basic or the minimum way of saying it as an illustration. It was a lot more complicated most of the time. So I don't know. I don't know if that's like the way to do it or the way most people like. It was a rhythm that we got into that was really enjoyable. And as a writer it doesn't, it didn't feel like writing prose or writing a movie screenplay or anything like that. It felt like it's just the first draft of what we're actually going to draw. And thank you, Tommy. Yes, we were very happy with that first page, and I don't want to show you anymore. Although I'm so tempted, of course, to keep going and say, oh, and then what happens? What they're looking at, and then here's the, but hopefully everyone will get a chance. Everyone who wants to will get a chance to take a look at this comic very soon. But then that's what we ended up with, and that's the I'm trying to think about. And then we ended up with something that looks like that on the first page, which the next thing that we had to do was, once we had all of our inked pages, we started getting samples from a printer, and we went to a nearby printer. I didn't actually know there were these digital printers very close to where I live. I was stealing myself to travel across the city and spend all day in some remote market somewhere, and then I realized that there's a market right here that people come to for printing. Now, it is possible that there'll be cheaper printing somewhere else, but there's always cheaper printing somewhere else. This is the kind of stuff you find out when you start talking to people. They're like, oh, you paid that much, you should go there, you can get it for that much. Somewhere you've got to think about what's convenient and what's speedy and what you can do comfortably and not exhaust yourself or put yourself in a bad mood for. So some part of that is maybe a convenience charge. So we found a bunch of printers over here. We found some printers online. We asked for some samples. And the interesting thing was, one of the first things that was interesting to us is this is what's called the B5 size. It's a little smaller than 7 by 10. The B5 size and the A4 size, which were larger. So this is the final cover of chapter 1. This was the rough. So this is a sample that we got made, and you'll see that the inside pages are actually the roughs that I was just showing you. This was just a way for us to get a sense and feel of it. So long before they were inked, we wanted to get a sense of the comic and the way it reads physically. And so we used the adjusted roughs. So not the absolute first roughs, but the ones with the panel sizes being changed. We used that one and got samples made. And so this was a rough cover, etc. And we got samples made in 2 sizes. One, the B5, and the other, the A4. And the funny thing was that the A4 size and the B4 size, they cost the same. They cost the same to manufacture, and so you can see that there's the size difference in both directions. But they cost the same to manufacture because this A4 size paper is what they have to use for this. So they just print it and cut it, and so they cut a lot of paper out of the side. So you still have to buy the same number of sheets of paper. You still have to pay for the printing. It's all the same. So there might be other places, and this is all digital printing, by the way, not offset printing. So there might be places in which these are different, but a number of places that we went to, these were the same. So now, obviously, the question came up, if it costs the same, let's just go for the bigger size. And I was, as a publisher, I was suddenly putting down my writer hat and putting on my publisher hat, and I was like, no, of course you gotta go for the bigger size because people see it and it's more value for money. People just associate bigger, and comics, people like them to be bigger. And we know what the art style is. We know the fact that it's this black and white line work, and we know how much space we have in it. But that, alongside looking at the samples, we made this very, I don't know what kind of a decision it was, but all of us involved were like, this smaller size is better. It's a better reading experience. It feels as an object. It feels nicer in my hands. There was another thing that we had. There was a paper that we were looking at, and the first paper that we saw was a 75 grams. So paper is GSM, grams per square meter. So the first paper that we saw was this 75 GSM paper, and it just looked like photocopier paper. It just did not look good to us at all. But we understood that that was the cheapest and the best, and that was the cheapest, and that's probably what we should go for. I don't even have a copy of it around here, I think. Um, but but we wanted to look at something a little higher grammage. So we got some samples at 100 grams paper, and then we went to 120. Now that was really expensive and would make the book way more expensive than we wanted it to be. But we just wanted to take a look at that like slightly glossier white paper, and it looked really rich and wonderful. But the off-white bond paper that we ended up using, and this light is probably not going to show you the distinction. Oh, you know what? Actually, if you have it against the front cover, you might be able to tell the difference. So the inside front cover is white, and this page, this paper, it has a slight off-white quality to it. Now, the same lighting that someone complimented a little while ago, that color correction that I'm doing on my stream video is probably adding a little bit of magenta to it, but it doesn't obviously have that magenta, but it's a slight off-white. And given the fact that this story is, it's a period piece, it's a historical fiction, but it's set in the past, and the art style, we were like, I think the smaller off-white paper at 100 bond is the book that we want, is the story. So to me, it was really funny, or at least it was an interesting thing to note that one, a bigger size, the one of A4, did not charm us the way I thought it would. And I was very much for the larger size. I was arguing with Nikhil and with Ashwita. Actually, Ashwita was sort of agreeing with me. And she was like, yeah, it's larger. And Nikhil was like, no, the smaller size is just, it's a nicer thing. I'm like, let's wait for the samples. And the samples came in, and I'd almost convinced Ashwita to side with me on this argument. And then we just took them out, and we were looking at the B5 and the A4, and we were like, man, I think Nikhil's right. This is just it's a prettier thing. So that was the first surprising thing, is bigger is not always. And this is something I've said before, and I particularly always bring up Raymond Briggs, and I bring up that Father Christmas miniaturized version. It's the perfect example of something where he made it smaller and it became so much more gorgeous. I mean, it's already a great book, but it just became so much more beautiful through that miniaturization. And there are so many small books and tiny books that I have that are absolutely wonderful for being that way. But I'm not talking about something tiny. I was just like, who wouldn't want something? Isn't this closer, but it wasn't. It wasn't for us as charming as this was. And the second surprise was the paper, that 120 GSM paper. It's closer to art paper, and it really makes the blacks quite glossy. Was not as pleasing to us as this one, off-white bond paper, the one that takes the blacks in a little bit more. It doesn't have that shine, but it felt for the story that we were really putting it all together in a way that made sense, instead of just trying to pick and choose individually what things might sound to us to be the best. And that, I think, was one of those things where I'm like, yeah, I think this is what it's all about. This is where those decisions become, I wouldn't say artistic decisions, but they do become, these aesthetic decisions do become quite interesting because they go against some common wisdom. But again, putting together a book that looks like a lovely book, that reads like a lovely book, whose paper and size and the way it feels in your hand is all part of the experience of it and the story, is something that I've felt so long and been preaching so long about, that it was really fun to put it into practice and to see it borne out in practice, even when it came down to the thing is that, yeah, I always say that I don't need the omnibus. I prefer, the sort of slimmer hardcovers, etc., etc. And it's like, yeah, it comes down to the same thing, because now the question will always be that when you did go across the other side from the table, when you did take it to the fest, would you have sold more copies if it had been A4? And that's a question that's impossible to answer. Or maybe it's impossible to answer, because I did think like, hey, let's take 20 copies of B5 and let's take 20 copies of A4 and we'll sell them for exactly the same price and we'll see which one moves more. This will be our A/B testing, so on and so forth. And we were almost going to do that. And then I again put on my publisher's hat and said, nope, being a publisher means making decisions. You can't be wishy-washy and like waffle around. You got to make a decision. You got to stick by it. If this is what you think, this is what you feel, you've got to put it into action. This is no algorithmic testing to see which one's going to give me the better results. Plus, you could muddy the waters. If you have the same price for the A4, you might end up with people saying, well, I want the smaller one, give it to me, for a lesser price, and that would not be the point at all. Or it would be like, well, yeah, of course, if you put the A4 next to the B5, everyone's going to go for the A4. No one will look at the B5 and know that it's better. So there were, first of all, too many variables. So it's not like you would actually learn anything other than get two numbers. But it was really a question, I think, of putting your foot down and saying, no, if this is what you stand for, or if this is what you think, then that's what you have to do. So we did end up going with the B5. I'm very happy we went with the B5, but I do think it's funny that they cost the same and we could have had a larger comic, and we unanimously chose to have a smaller comic because we honestly, it wasn't a question of saving money. We didn't save any money doing that. In fact, we may have increased chances of errors because of the level of cutting that each copy is going to take, and how much you might end up with more variation between copies, which we definitely have anyway. But you might end up with more problems because you went for the cutting, and you could have just kept it at A4 and had minimal cutting. But we didn't save money, and we might have risked more, but it seems like a much better thing. It doesn't just seem like something manufactured for the sake of being manufactured, but it does feel like something that has been designed and engineered. Black and white comics look better with some off-white paper. Yeah, I think so too. You know what I was remembering? I was remembering those earlier collections of Love and Rockets, not the big fat omnibuses, because I think they've got like very white paper and it's kind of stunning to look at them because of the blacks being so shiny. And I know some people really like them, but I like the more off-white Palomar collections because they just have that feeling. And yeah, goodbye chunky rice. I mean, it's the same kind of idea, like I've got these black and white lines and I've got these spaces inside it. Can I use that for expressiveness? And of course, black and white production is cheaper as a chapterized approach to the story that we want to tell. We did want to make sure that each chapter was something that was affordable and not ridiculously expensive. Now, when we finish the whole story, maybe, and this is something that Nikhil will think about deeply, is that maybe we'll make it a color comic for the graphic novel edition of it, or maybe we'll just like it so much in black and white that we'll keep it black and white. But that is something that it's going to be very expensive to do it then as well. But as a 144-page book with pricing and distribution and sale, etc., you've got a little bit more leeway, something that you don't have with 24 pages. There's only so much you can do with price, and there's only so much that you can sacrifice, and that's another thing, is that like something like 75 GSM paper would have made it far cheaper for us to make, and maybe even more sales would have happened at a lower price if we had done that. But it just didn't look good. And our whole point is that if you spend this much time, we're not making it super fancy, but we do want it to have a certain integrity as far as the reading experience is concerned. And so that's what we did. B5, off-white paper, color front and back covers, and we took it to Indie Comics Fest. So what we did before we went to Indie Comics Fest is we launched our website and our Instagram for Indian Summer Press. Check those out again. I'm letting people who may have joined late. Floating Man says, do you ship to Gujarat? Yes, in India, we're shipping everywhere. So you place an order on the website and we'll ship it to you everywhere. And end maybe with a little bit about shipping as well. But yes, if you're in India or if you know people in India who can get you a copy, that's where we're shipping. And I'm going to look into how we can get copies outside. But we set up the website and we had a little Google form over there asking people what we thought, we just asked people to pre-book their copies so we knew how many copies to take to the Indie Comics Fest. But people started booking copies and putting their addresses in, and we were like, okay, yeah, we'll take some pre-orders after Indie Comics Fest, we'll ship them out. But we got a number of pre-orders over there. We were quite surprised. So I thought that we were being a little aggressive in how many copies we thought we would print or how many copies we would sell. But I figured that at Indie Comics Fest, people say you'll sell between 20 and 40 copies. And I figured, okay, then we'll try to sell more online after Indie Comics Fest and sell it off there. So we had decided to manufacture 100 copies, which is a lot. But I was like, okay, we can get rid of 100 copies over 2 months, and that's fine. We'll keep them at home and ship them out of there. But then we got so many pre-orders that we actually ended up printing more. And then I went back the day before the Indie Comics Fest to the printers and said, can you give me 50 more copies? So we did 120 copies in the first print run, and then we did a 50 copy sort of top up because of what we were seeing in pre-orders. So at this point of time, most of the pre-orders have been fulfilled or will be fulfilled through hand delivery for the people that we need to meet, or things will be shipping out. I think the last batch is shipping out tomorrow. Ashwita has been working for the last 4 days, sort of packaging and putting things into packages. And we are, just before this live stream started, we're almost, I think, sold out. We are getting like 1 or 2 copies left. So I will be getting another reprint and replenishing stock. I mean, it's just a few, it's 170 copies. It's not that big. But for us, it's very cool that we were able to gather that much interest initially. Of course, this is all the friends and family interest. Whether it actually catches on is going to now depend on the next level. But the whole experience of going to the fest and sitting at this crowded table, it got really crowded at some point of time, and it was just like a mass of people at one point of time. I was like wishing I had a corner table or something like that, but it was still a fantastic, exciting experience. And seeing all these other people selling their comics, it really gets you hyped up into this, and it feels a lot more connected to the things. But it's not going, that's really going to be the way that we want to look at things, is that go to festivals and sell face to face or sell directly from your website. That's the way that we would hope to get sort of word out there and get people to recommend it, or if people enjoy it and they want to buy a copy for their friends or for their family, just see how this thing could work as a single issue thing while we work on the second chapter and the third chapter and the fourth chapter. Maybe people will write letters to us. Maybe we'll have a letters page at the back of our book, which is what we want, is that we want the last page, the inside back cover, to be like a letters page if people write to us about the story as it goes on. And we like this idea of a chapterized story, making up a graphic novel. It's something that gives us the discipline of finishing on a deadline, and we can go back and tweak things later if we want to, but at least now there is this. And we also like this idea of a bunch of readers, even if it's a small group of them, a bunch of readers sitting and waiting for the next chapter to come out. And then, so we're hoping every 3 months we bring a chapter out, and then 6 chapters makes 144 pages for The Sun is Made of Silver to be published as a book. And that's going to be sometime next year. But in the interim, there are these and the submissions and what we invite people to pitch to us and what we hopefully develop with other writers and artists here in India and maybe even outside of India. Although there are always those issues and restrictions that I mentioned earlier. Kickstarter for the full story is not a bad idea. I don't think Kickstarter is available technically in India. You kind of have to do Kickstarter if you want to put, and I know people who've done Kickstarter projects, but you need someone in the US or the UK sort of running it for you, even if the money is coming from people in India. It's a thing that maybe, yeah, but crowdfunding for the graphic novel, or at least for the hardcover edition of it, which is something that Nikhil has brought up on a couple of occasions, and Ashwita seems very excited about it. And I'm just like, you guys, do you know what hardcover binding costs? It's going to be 8 times more than paperback binding. So there are all kinds of fun, playful things to think of. But these are things that I think every book should have in their consideration. And I would love to work with creators on things like, what size should your book be? What kind of paper should it have? What kind of binding should it have? Well, this is what it's going to cost, and that's how much it's going to have to be priced if that happens. And is this something that people are going to be willing to pay? I think there are some authors and creators who don't want to be involved with any of that, and I completely get it. But I think more and more people should be aware of these things, because otherwise other people say, we're the experts in all of this, you stay out of that, you've done your job, now collect your royalty that we deign to pay you after we've done no marketing for your work. So these are the kind of stories you end up hearing from creators and from writers and artists. So again, the attempt is to sort of bridge that gap and to put in an alternative way of working in which you do this profit sharing, but you've also created a business plan together. And every book and every project is its own business plan. So what we do for this is not what you have to do for something else. And that might have a completely different approach for a completely different market, and will have a different level of involvement and a different way of breaking the finances together. There might be certain projects that will have investments from people who wish to invest in that project. We would want to make sure that has no editorial influence, but that also makes the person who's putting the money in for manufacturing a profit sharer. So there are, I think, a number of ways that are alternatives to the way things are done right now, which is a lot more conveyor belt machinery type of publishing, and figuring out whether this kind of grassroots word of mouth thing works in the face of these monolithic distribution units. I think that's going to be the real fun of finding out exactly how far can you push it and where that ceiling lies. But yes, that's the whole story, everyone. There is, yes, if you want it shipped to Gujarat, fill out the form, give us your address, we'll have it mailed over there. As long as you have a mailing address in India, we can get to you. When are we going to get to the serious online drama due to you selling out and becoming a shill? Well, is this, oh, right, you mean this is selling out? Man, if this is selling out, I don't know, man. I think people have exaggerated what selling out is to be. I'm not really sure about the shill aspect of it. The shill aspect of it is, yeah, if you're doing your own business and if you're touting your own skills and your projects, of course you're a shill. But that, I think, is, if I'm in the crowd when the snake oil salesman is selling something and I say, yeah, I tried that snake oil and it really worked for me, I think that disingenuousness is something that I think that marketing aspect of it needs to get rid of, where someone will pitch something no matter what. And I really think this idea of, I know how to market something I love, or I'll figure out how to market something I love, is really the way an editorially based publishing house should be. Is we only publish things that we love. We're proud to have published this, and therefore, of course, we're going to market it. Of course, we're going to talk it up. Of course, we're going to do that. Now, how much money are you going to spend on it, and how much money do you expect to make back from it? Those are calculations that I think most people can sit down and take a look at. It's not calculus or, rocket science or things like that. It's simple algebra. And I think if people stop, having their eyes glaze over, especially the creative types, if they can just stop their eyes from rolling back in their heads anytime someone mentions numbers, I think there's a lot to be understood and exploited, or at least done differently over there, which is, I think, the goal. Thank you very much for all your congratulations. Will you put it on Amazon? That's a good question. It's a good question. I don't think we're going to put this single on Amazon. We'd prefer it to be in independent bookstores. So one thing that we're approaching is seeing it be in independent, individually owned bookstores. Is one way of getting to new readers and people who do not know, and getting a partnership, something that we're exploring right now as far as distribution is concerned, of your web orders. So then it's a question of how do you drive people to your website? How do you drive people to your Instagram or wherever you may have sale links? And then how do you process those sales? So there are different aspects of it. Amazon is probably something that we will not be able to avoid if we want to sell a bound book. But a pamphlet of 24 pages anyway has other issues when it comes to storage and when it comes to that. And the margins, again, do not make sense. So for the single issues, I believe we are going to avoid Amazon for now, and try to do it the independent bookstore and independent bookstore distribution route. Yeah, I mean, I think if anyone wants to talk about import and how to get it into other countries, like one thing that I thought of is like if someone wants to buy 20 copies from me internationally, I can try to figure out a way of getting the best postage out of that, and then they can distribute it to anybody who's interested over there. But that means that they're going to have to do like sales and shipping and all of that stuff. So I'm not really sure if people will want to do that, but we can always explore that. I mean, it's not like I can't ship abroad. It's just that I don't think it makes any sense. Like, even if I price it at $10, right? Let's say this thing costs $9.99 as an international price. It's like I'm not able to cover shipping and handling in $9.99. So that's, I think, where it becomes a little odd for, you can't have a $20 price on something that's a 24-page black and white comic. I mean, I understand it's all very artisanal, and I understand that it's a collector's item. It's going to be really, really rare one day. But I can't bring myself to tell people that it's $20 for that. So it's that part of it. However, I do know that when one wants something from somewhere else, I've paid kind of things. But we'll see. I do think that if nothing else, there will be an ebook. I wish there is a way to get the print book, but yeah, maybe there are hubs. Maybe there can be like a United States hub and a UK hub, and like certain places in which I can get a number of copies in, and then people can contact that person or that bookstore or something like that. Who knows? I think it's just getting started right now. We've only sold like 150, 160 copies right now. That might be all there is to it, although I certainly hope not. There will be more stories and there'll be more chapters of this story. But how to tackle the international distribution is something that we're definitely going to be thinking about, because there have already been so many people with so many kind words and saying, when can I get a copy of this? And they don't even know if it's any good. They just, that's what's so warm and lovely about it, is no one's talked it up or no one said it's a good story. It's just that kindness and that support. And I really would like to get comics into people's hands. So let's see how that goes. But if it's successful, if it works out over here, if there is a little bit of something, I think that will add to that traction. If nothing else, in say another 3 months' time, another 6 months' time, when there's chapter 1, 2, and 3 done and out, maybe that will be a lot more practical. Maybe putting together a bundle for people. Here's half the story, and then there'll be 4, 5, and 6, and then you can have the second half of the story. Maybe that's something I can be, figured out. So we'll definitely keep, we will definitely keep working on it. All right, so I think that's all I have for this evening. This is a more of an unusual kind of thing, but I did, as I said right at the beginning, did want to share with everyone this wonderful, exciting experience. We'll be continuing with this story, but I will also be continuing with the videos on this channel, which have taken a bit of a hit just because of all this manufacturing and all these other things I had to learn. But I will be maybe doing a closer look and diary on my Patreon and channel memberships, in which I might talk a little bit more about this comic. But the channel is not going to become, to get to what Tommy was saying, the channel is not going to become a shill for the company. And if there is a company presence that intersects with this channel, I'll try to keep it as rare as possible. But I do also think there is a natural overlap from the point of view of comics fans and lovers. So the Instagram for Indian Summer Press and the website for Indian Summer Press is where, if you're interested in the publishing company and what we're doing, that's where I would say follow along. I'll mention things over here in public from time to time, but the behind the scenes and the writing and the art process, production, all of these kind of things, I'll put them on just for supporters and patrons and things like that, so as not to muddy it up for all of the general viewers. Hopefully be back very soon with some new comics which have been sent to me, and I've been dying to talk about them, but I just haven't had the time to read them. And that really sucks, because people have sent me comics and I should read them. So now I've got a little bit more free time after having shipped these out, and I've got maybe a couple of days before I'm supposed to start working on the script for the next chapters. And hopefully next weekend we'll see at least a short video from me on a couple of new comics that have come to my into my mailbox. So unless there are any other questions, oh yes, the final question, the one question that I left off from the beginning, I think Arindam had asked me that, how you feeling? How do you feel having taken the jump? And he said, not financially. And this is the thing, is that because it's a small print run and because it's a small book, the financial outlay is not that much, really. I mean, it's money. It's like about maybe $200, everything put together. But not a problem. That is not the thing. It's a question of the effort. Is it worth it? Yes, absolutely. At this point of time, I'm on a high. I'm really happy with the way the first chapter has come out. I'm really happy with the collaboration I've had with Nikhil and working on this. It's been a true co-authorship. I'm really happy with the way Ashwita and I have been handling like the business and the logistics part of it, not having done any of this before, and we're having a good time. I mean, I'm speaking on our behalf, but I think she's having a good time as well. So all of this is very exciting, and we're, I believe, still in that honeymoon period. So the answer to that question will be absolutely. It was fantastic. It's fantastic. It continues to be fantastic. But ask me in 6 months' time. That's, I think, when it'll be, when the true answer might come out. Right now, it's going to be very positive. But that's all I got for this evening. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I hope you enjoyed this live stream, and I'll be back very soon talking about some new comics in the mail, as well as a couple of videos that I've been promising for a long time. This has been For the Love of Comics. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye.